Well, welcome to Water Street Bookstore and our reading with Elizabeth Marshall Thomas. Liz, I want to thank you for coming out and reading tonight. I love this book.
Oh, I'm so glad.
The first chapter it made me tear up with all the different life forms in the bedroom, and I love the way you think about our life on this earth and all of life. And you're one of my mentors, along with folks like Jane Jacobs. You're the what I love about your writing is, like Jane Jacobs, you're the observer who was never trained professionally, so you don't see the things that you need to see. And I love that about your writing, that you are always observing everything that's there.
Oh, that's
and you
nice.
haven't been trained not to see certain things.
Yeah,
So
that's true.
thank you for being here, and please join me in welcoming Elizabeth Marshall Thomas.
Thank you very much for having me. This is my favorite bookstore, so it's an honor to be here. I'm going to read a chapter. It's called Our Bedroom. My husband and I are getting on in years, so we go to bed early. During the night, I need a drink of water. While running the faucet, I notice something dark by the shower down near the floor. A little mildew is growing. Telling myself to fix it in the morning, I drink my glass of water and go back to the bedroom where my husband is asleep. Snow has fallen, reflecting the moon and filling the room with pale light. Our dog sleeps between us, and she woke when I got up, so she smiles and pats her tail twice to greet my return. One of our cats sleeps on my pillow because our bed is under the window and he likes to know what's happening outdoors. He's also awake and he purrs when he sees me. Then a new thought strikes him and he jumps to the windowsill. We live in rural New Hampshire, and he may be wondering about a coyote who goes by now and then. If the cat is interested, so am I, and I also look out the window. No one is there that I can see, just moonlight and fresh snow. I get in bed and the cat comes with me, delicately sidestepping a small potted plant on the windowsill. He brushes against it but doesn't knock it over. For his care, I'm grateful. The plant is a hyacinth, the gift of a friend. A fall to the floor could damage it, and that would traumatize me because I've been caring for the bulb since it sprouted. It will soon start to bloom, so I'm happy it's safe, all in one piece, with the soil still packed tightly around it. I pull up the blanket and the cat curls in beside me. He puts his hand on my arm and rests his head against me. His purring fades to soft, intermittent little purrs. He's dozing off. Soon all of us are sleeping, quietly breathing, and our room is a peaceful, moonlit scene with no surprises. Who would guess that in our bedroom and bathroom are representatives of every major group of life forms that ever lived on Earth since life began? We have a limited view of what's around us. During the day, our room is bright and sunny. Standing near the window is like standing near a heater. We know the warmth is from the sun, but it seldom strikes us that this implies the same kind of flames you get by lighting a match, except that these flames are 93 million miles away. What fuel is burning and where does it come from? Did the sun begin with a full fuel ration, and if it did, how much is left? Our poor little furnace, toiling away in the basement, seems helpless and small. And when the snow was falling, we thought of it as new, but we were mistaken. That snow was maybe 10 billion years old, much older than the earth on which it was falling. And according to a widely accepted theory, the moon is younger than the snow, having been torn from the earth by an asteroid about the size of Mars. The water that now is snow must have been on Earth as liquid or steam when this happened, but Gaia didn't make that water, she just collected it. It's thought that the Big Bang made the hydrogen part of the H2O, and maybe 3 billion years later, the explosion of a supernova made the oxygen part. Together they made molecules of water, and according to at least one theory, these were in the space dust of the supernova, as its swirling particles combined to form our solar system. All our planet can do about the water now is to turn it into ice or mist, or the snow reflecting moonlight through the window. Yet we don't think of its age when we see it, and we don't understand the range of life forms revealed by the moonlight it reflects, or those too small to see. Yet here we all are, all in one room, someone from every major kind of life form that ever graced our planet, me with a 10 billion year old substance in my stomach, and the issues of a civet-like Eocene mammal from 60 million years ago, asleep on either side of me. The issue, who is now a dog, sits up and turns toward the window, her ears stiff and her eyes wide. Perhaps the coyote, another issue of that civet, just went by. What are these groups of life forms, and why are we in them? Uppermost are 3 domains, one for bacteria, a number for archaea, which are microbes that look and act like bacteria but are different inside, and the third for us, the eukaryotes. Our eukaryote domain has 4 kingdoms, one for animals, one for fungi, one for plants, and one for protists, the catch-all name for a life form that isn't a microbe or one of the above. Amoebas are protists, for instance, and those in our room are with the hyacinth. The soil in its pot is wild from our field, where protists abound, not pre-treated soil from a store. The animals in our room are the dog and the cat, me and my husband, a few little hunting spiders, a few little web-spinning spiders, and probably some dust mites. The plant, of course, is the hyacinth, and the fungus is the mildew I saw in the bathroom. So maybe I won't clean it up after all. It has taken shelter in the house where I take shelter. It is clinging to life just like me. Such different lives, such different organisms. In the morning, one will feed itself with sunlight. Another will write about ethnic conflict in Czechoslovakia after World War I. A third can see us even in the dark, because whatever glimmer comes into his eyes bounces through them again, so he gets twice as much. Others are preying upon the dust mites, who prey upon skin particles the rest of us have shed, and still others find nourishment in drywall. But those are just the larger life forms. Most of the organisms in our room are invisible, but nevertheless are everywhere, busily splitting themselves in half. These, of course, are microbes. Some are in our stomachs, breaking down the food we ate for dinner so we can absorb its nourishment, and in return for their help, we're keeping them fed and wet. Thus, our relationship with them is symbiotic. 2 organisms have joined for the benefit of both. That we have this relationship is not at all surprising. Almost everything living on the planet has this relationship with something else, because symbiosis has been practiced since the earliest times. Cooperation is an important engine of survival, and all who manage to do it are better off than they would be if they were going it alone. Helpful microbes are not our only occupants. Inside our eukaryote bodies, our own cells are outnumbered by microbes 10 to 1. We don't know what they are or what they're doing, and we never think about them. We see ourselves as independent, solitary organisms, when in fact we're heavily populated ecosystems, filled to the brim with passengers as if we were overcrowded trains. So there you have it, representatives from all the major groups of organisms that ever existed on our planet, right there in our bedroom and bathroom. We may seem a bit different in the ways we look, breathe, move, and metabolize, but we're related. Our genes may be arranged in different sequences, but we share a common ancestor, so we pass genetic information with the same genetic code, or almost the same, as a somewhat alternate theory has recently been offered. This being the case, what's so surprising is how little we know about the others who evolved from our ancestor, and that would be a microbe who lived in water, maybe in the sea. That's it. Thank you.
What's it all about?
I have one little short one, shall I?
Yeah, please.
This is, why do we look the way we look? Why do we have no fur when fur protects us? Mosquitoes can't bite through heavy fur, or not easily, and African nights can be freezing. Bear skins are for those such as rhinos and elephants, who need to lose heat, not keep it. And why do we walk on our hind legs when walking on all fours is easier, faster, and safer? One theory holds that we ran on our hind legs to escape our predators, but that's unlikely. Any mid to large size animal runs faster than we do, and when we're running from something, we present our backs. Roll a tennis ball across the floor and see what your cat does. To run from predators invites them, so that can't be why we move the way we do. As for standing up straight, if we do, we see farther than we can when on all fours. We also look bigger, and looking bigger is a widespread defense. It's why bears stand up on their hind legs and why our skin prickles when we encounter something scary. When our bodies were covered with an important amount of hair, rather than the pitiful little strands we have today, we could make ourselves much bigger by bristling. If a mid-sized predator approached and we stood up and bristled, he might think, uh-oh, not this one, and leave. Yet despite all the theories, the long and short of this question is, no one really knows why we walk on our hind legs. Why we lost our body hair has also inspired theories. We were an African species whose ancestors lived in shady forests, but later came to live on savannas where the days can warm to 120 degrees Fahrenheit or higher. Perhaps we needed to cool ourselves by shedding our body hair, but kept our head hair as protection from the sun. That's one theory, but it's worth remembering that baboons still have hair on their bodies as well as on their heads. Why didn't they lose their body hair and walk on their hind legs? And if they didn't need to, why did we? And this is in the book, but not in this chapter. Baboons and people came down from the trees, and because there was a glacial period, and most of the water on Earth was bound up as ice, and the trees didn't get enough water, so the forests withered, the grassland spread. If we swung from tree to tree, the trees were too far apart for us and for baboons, and the baboons made a whole different plan than we did, and people don't seem to think about that, but there you are, they are baboons. Another theory suggests that we kept the hair on our heads to shade us from the sun, but shed the hair on our bodies to get rid of lice. Then we were overexposed to sunlight, so we made clothes. If we had also shed the hair on our heads and made hats instead, things would have gone better. But we didn't, and some of the lice who stayed on our heads evolved into body lice who live in our clothes. This could date the invention of clothes, which seem to have appeared along with the lice about 100,000 years ago. Our clothes created whole new ecosystems with us inside them, and it only got worse when some of the lice in our clothes evolved as crotch crabs. Thus the invention of clothes didn't bring us the benefits we had imagined, because after that we had head lice, body lice, crotch crabs, and clothes, which we had to clean and mend. If we'd thought this through before shedding our fur, we'd have only one of those problems. Our last misfortune casts doubt on the creation theory. If everything was created all at once, Adam and Eve were created with 3 kinds of lice, plus tapeworms. Why all these pests, they would have cried, furiously scratching. No wonder they left the Garden of Eden, no doubt to plunge into the nearest pond where guinea worms, Giardia parasites, and snails that carried snail fever were waiting. But who can say? Perhaps the Creator favored the parasites and made humans to be their food. It seems risky to include clothing as an evolutionary indicator. Until very recently, only about 60 years ago, our direct ancestors, the San, had traditionally worn minimal clothing. Men wore leather loincloths, and women wore front and back leather aprons and leather capes as pouches for their babies. The men were excellent hunters, so their people had a steady supply of antelope skins from which they could have made all kinds of clothes, but they didn't. Skin pigment protected them from the sun, Their leather capes and campfires protected them from the cold, and they didn't have lice, although their minimal clothing could have harbored them. The above is just one small fact to be learned from the San, who are known as the first people. According to DNA studies, the rest of us descended from them, and their language seems to be the root of all languages. Living in what I now call the old way, they could show us more about life in the natural world than most scientists, not only because they knew every inch of their part of it, but also because knowledge was the key to their survival. The San showed us what knowledge it takes to live in the natural world, the kind of knowledge all species who do so must have in one way or another. That's... Thank you. Thank you. And if people have questions, I will gladly answer them. Yes.
So, with about 100,000 years ago was when modern humans left Africa, right? Roughly.
Oh, it's when we came out, I think it's when we came out of the trees. I think we left Africa after that.
Okay.
Well, I mean, as humans, we populated most of it. There were people that weren't human, Homo erectus and Australopithecus, and they filled most, the eastern part of Africa certainly, and they started over the, and became Neanderthals. And the ones who stayed in Africa became Homo sapiens, and the ones who went became Neanderthals. And then we went up, then the Homo sapiens went up and met the Neanderthals.
Yeah, because Homo erectus went all the way to China, didn't it?
Oh, Homo erectus went out, yeah, completely across Asia, yes.
Do we have any evidence that they had clothing?
Homo erectus, I don't think so.
Yeah.
I don't think so. I don't know. Clothing doesn't fossilize, so...
That's true.
It's hard to know.
Not exactly a, durable material.
No. But they made tools, of course, and they learned to control fire. They learned to make fire. And this isn't in the book, but which is tragic, because as soon as the book was in print, it was found that that hawks in Australia do what the Homo erectus did, which was to take lightning would set a bushfire, and then the people would go and take the Homo erectus would go and take sticks from that and go to their encampment and light a fire. They later learned to make a fire, and the Bushmen, the San, would make a fire, but they didn't if they could help it. I mean, mostly they would have a fire burning with coals, and then they'd take some of the coals and start another fire. It took a long time to start a fire. They had a stick, a male stick, and a female stick, and the female stick had a hole in it, so you put the male stick in the hole, and then if two guys do it, then it goes faster. But you put a little tinder in the hole, and then that starts. But it took forever to start a fire. So the other way was better. But the Neanderthals were starting fires, and Homo erectus learned to start a fire.
Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned that, because it seems like now that there's more and more evidence that our ancestors, when they came out of Africa, like you said, encountered a lot of other types of human beings.
Oh, they did. Oh, sure they did. Yes,
interbred
indeed.
with them, and like in a sense, we're all hybrids of these different human species.
Exactly. That's right. And we think of just Homo sapiens or just Homo erectus, but actually there were several different kinds of these hominins, all living at the same time. And if you think about the dog family, you have coyotes and wolves in the same place, and you have tigers and lions in the same place, and leopards, tigers and leopards, lions and leopards together, and so forth. It just goes on and on.
Yeah, and
many
like
of the
now,
same family, different species of the same family.
Right, especially like in this area, you have like coy dogs now who are hybrid.
Yeah, because they can interbreed.
Right.
Yeah,
Because they're
exactly.
close enough that they can interbreed and produce
Yep.
fertile offspring.
And we could and did interbreed with Neanderthals, and a lot of people have Neanderthal genes, but they don't have the mitochondrial DNA of the people who have the Neanderthal genes. Don't have the mitochondrial DNA, which is transmitted only by the mother.
Right.
And that's kind of a mystery that.
Actually, I didn't know that.
Pardon me?
I didn't know that. That's interesting.
It is interesting, but there are theories. Darwin thought that women were Neanderthal men had beards. The first Homo sapiens, if they were like the Bushmen, they didn't have a lot of body hair or big beards or anything. But the Neanderthal men were hairy and big and everything. And Darwin thought that the sexual selection caused the DNA problem because women preferred men with beards. So
Yeah.
he had a beard, so he should know if I
I
didn't
think I
know.
read a while ago that the reason, yeah, like you said, like the fact that men have beards is probably some kind of sexual selection
Yeah,
process. And it was interesting you mentioned symbiosis because, I mean, you look at like human cells, like mitochondria were probably independent organisms at one point.
yeah,
That once, photosynthetic microbes started pumping all this oxygen in the atmosphere, they started dying. So they had to form this symbiotic relationship with other types of microbes, and that's probably why mitochondrial DNA is different than the DNA of the nucleus.
yes. I didn't quite finish my regret, which is that hawks, speaking of starting a fire, hawks in Australia go to where there is a wildfire, and they take sticks from it and fly to a place where they want to set it on fire, and then they catch whoever is coming out.
Wow.
And we saw this. We lived in the Kalahari for a long time in the pre-contact days of the city, and they. Gosh, what was I going to say? I can't remember.
The hawks started.
Oh yeah, the birds there would, if there was a wildfire, birds would come swarming to the wildfire to catch whoever was coming out. But the hawks figured out how to use fire like people did, and I would love to have that in this book, but it's too late. It came out after the book was in print, so I couldn't add it.
I also have one more question for you.
Yeah.
There's been recent discoveries in other parts of the solar system that there might be habitable moons.
Oh sure.
Do you think that we're going to discover some other form of life?
Oh my goodness. Wait a minute. I've got a thing on that. Yeah, the universe is said to have upward of 100 billion galaxies. Another estimate says 500 billion galaxies. Each galaxy is said to have perhaps 200 billion stars, some with planets. To support life as we know it, a planet must have certain elements such as nitrogen and carbon, and it must have water as a liquid, probably not as ice or steam, although water bears could live with ice or steam. So the planet must not be too near or too far from its star. Not all of these requirements are met by every planet, but with 100 billion galaxies to choose from, each with 200 billion stars, and if the laws of probability mean anything at all, life might be found on at least 100 billion planets. Even if only 1% of those planets hosts life, that's a billion other planets that could have developed something like ours.
Wow.
It's not possible that we're alone in the universe, far from it.
I just feel like it's so statistically unlikely.
I'm sorry?
I feel like it, like you said, it's so statistically unlikely because
Yeah, it's impossible. It seems a billion. What was the first number? It was 100 billion planets could possibly have life. 1% of that is a billion planets.
yeah, and I think there's
Yeah.
probably around 100 billion planets in our galaxy alone.
Yeah.
So I mean, there's got to be. I mean, maybe not intelligent life, but
Well, why not?
yeah, I know because if you're given billions of years of evolution and a similar environment, why not?
Yeah, and we think of humans as intelligent, but the fact is mammals and birds, even insects, have intelligence and can learn and remember and blah, blah, blah.
I know they've done a lot of work with especially with corvids, like ravens,
like with,
corvids, like ravens especially, and that they're highly intelligent. They're highly sociable animals.
oh yeah, oh yeah.
I think they believe. I was reading an article the other day, and they had this problem-solving test where they had a young human child actually try to figure it out, and the raven did the same test, and the raven actually solved it.
Oh, I'm not
faster.
surprised. The raven was probably a grown-up.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, time and again. I mean, thousands and thousands of examples of and when you look at the San, our species, the Bushmen, if you live in the natural world, you have to have certain things. You have to. I mean, it is an instinct. People say it's instinct, but there is no instinct that covers all that you have to know. Thought, memory, learning, that sort of thing is vastly better. And since it's so good and it works so well, and it seems to develop generally throughout, I mean, octopuses are very intelligent. So throughout the animal kingdom, even plants remember things. And a wonderful book by Wallenben is The Hidden Life of Trees. He talks about plants that remember.
And they communicate
And
with
learn.
one another too.
And sorry?
They communicate with one another.
And they communicate,
Yeah.
yeah. They just don't do it our way, but they
Right.
do it. And to think that other planet, that, I mean, it's such a common, widespread thing on this planet. It would be the very amazing thing would be if there wasn't anything like this. That would be the knockout piece of information. Otherwise, we should assume that there is very easily.
It was also interesting you mentioned the San.
I'm sorry?
It was interesting you mentioned the San, because I've seen pictures of the San Bushmen,
Yeah.
and they, if you look at them, like their facial structure, they look almost like a blending of like the various modern human races. Like they look
Well, they were the first race. I mean,
right
were
because
the first people.
they look African, but they also kind of vaguely look Caucasian. They look
Oh,
vaguely Asian.
that's right. That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, they have quite a few features that they have. Kids are born with what's called the Mongolian spot. It's a dark spot on your back, about the middle of your back, lower part of your back, and Bushman babies have that, and Asian people have that. Oh, many things, many things. I mean, they were the first people, so we went in all directions from that.
How many of the Bushmen are there left?
I don't know, but the old way, the living by hunting and gathering is pretty well gone. There are people who, tracking was a great thing. So tourists go and they think they take part in a hunt because they do some tracking. And if they do tracking, then that's real. But the ecosystem is pretty much gone. I mean, it's changed very much since we were there in the 50s and early 60s. And the people we met were pre-contact. And so that was really how our kind lived for 100,000 years. And now I mean, that was very successful. They had the most successful culture the world has ever known, human culture. And it's gone pretty much, but they wanted to be, the Bushmen that we knew wanted to be rural Namibians. They just wanted to, have jobs, sit around in bars, live in houses. And now they pretty much do. I'm in touch with a guy who's the grandson of the people we knew very well. And he has email, so we correspond by email. And every time I hit send, I think of the months we spent driving through country that was called Unexplored, means white people hadn't been there. The people who had been there, 80,000 years, had explored. They had explored it.
It's just fascinating that
It was
a
fascinating.
small you gotta think like a small family group
Yeah.
of the San left Africa and just spread everywhere. They went through Eurasia. They went to Australia. They went eventually their distant descendants went to the Americas.
Yep,
Like,
yep,
it's incredible that people were able to do that.
yeah, yes. Well, a lot of things spread. Lions spread everywhere except Australia.
Oh, that's true.
And, I mean, they were everywhere. They were here. And they didn't get to Australia, but there was a lion-like marsupial. Thylacoleo carnifex it was.
Look that up.
So Liz, you've written 4 or 5 books that are in the Hidden Life series.
And sort of, yeah.
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 Different publishers.
Different publishers, yeah.
And now you have imitators.
I
As
don't
a,
know, everything is the hidden life.
exactly.
Yeah.
So as someone that's interested in publishing, do you have any thoughts about that, or
Oh,
who came up with the idea for doing the first Hidden Life book?
Me.
Which
the hidden
You
life
were-
of dogs, yeah, before
you were
that.
working with Peter Davison at
Oh,
Houghton?
yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
Dear Peter, I miss him so.
He encouraged you.
Great guy, yeah.
He encouraged you so much. So any thoughts with this Hidden Life thing that you've spawned?
Oh, I mean, it seems normal enough. I mean, it's kind of a good beginning it's a good, I mean, I don't mind if people copy it, it's
Right.
fine.
Yeah. And you've read Peter's book on trees?
Pardon
and
me?
You've read Peter's books, the man that wrote Hidden Life of Trees, and
Oh, yes, I read his book, yeah.
yeah.
I read The Hidden Life of Trees, yes.
So imitation, sincerest form of flattery.
His book is, I think it's an excellent book. It's a fascinating book. It's got fabulous stuff in it. And you have to really know your stuff before you can write a book like that.
Yeah.
So I was honored that he liked the title.
It's true. Yeah. I got that too.
Any other questions? Thank you for carrying the question and
Oh,
answer.
yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to like.
No,
No, it was
fascinating.
wonderful.
It was an interesting question and fun to answer. Thank
I feel
you.
like you know, he had this emphasis on the fact that we started out as these nomadic hunter-gatherers. I feel like eventually humans might even go back to that. If we ever spread out into the stars, like, we'll go back to that kind of semi-nomadic existence and just spread everywhere, like we just did all over the earth.
That's the thought, yeah.
I think Carl Sagan talks about that.
I'm sorry?
I think Carl Sagan talks about that in one of his
Yes,
books.
I think so, yeah. Well, it's sustainable, that's one thing.
Right.
And, I mean, the Bushmen, 100,000 years, the most successful human culture ever. Nobody believed, I've called my first book The Harmless People, which was the translation of their name for themselves, Jute Qua. See, the Jute person, Qua, is Qua. I can't do it, my mouth is dry. Click. That means safe or clean or pure or harmless. And C is plural. So that's what they call themselves. And everybody thought I was romanticizing the Bushmen and so forth. It says right in the first chapter that it's the name for themselves. So if people don't want to read the first chapter, at least the first chapter before they jump to a conclusion. That's not my fault. I can't do anything about that. But they avoided jealousy. Nobody was better than anybody else. They had no headman, no chief. Everybody was equal. Women were as important as men. When they made decisions, they did it by consensus. And women's voices and opinions were just as valuable as men's. And the point was to keep unity. It wasn't that they were extra nice or something like that. It was their survival. The unity that they had was their survival. And it worked for all of, an encampment was, they did archaeological dig on an encampment and found that it was continuous occupancy for 85,000 years. And somebody else was writing, they wrote a book about our family, this woman wrote a book about our family, full of mistakes. she had things like the Bushmen go wandering around in search of food and water. And I pointed out that, if they'd been there for 85,000 years, I bet they found the water in that time. And she was one of the people who thought I was just romanticizing by calling them. It doesn't matter. That book is going nowhere. And it is about photography. It's not about it's just, if you ever read it, it's just wrong, but never mind.
But it sounds like human beings originally survived through cooperation and
Yeah.
communalism.
Yes, that was the key to survival. If the water, this is where they lived, where there was no surface water. That was the thing. And if your water hole got polluted, which one did, hyenas fell in it. They tried to drink, they fell in and drowned. And that was polluted, so nobody drank from that water. But the people who had lived there could go and live with relatives in other water holes. Lions also used these water holes. And that was the thing. The lions did not hunt people. And that is the only place. I mean, when I got there, I thought it was normal, okay? It was normal for them. And it had been going on for, goodness knows how long. But they literally did not. Women didn't go on hunts. Hunting was, women had the power of women was, a woman can make another person. The man can hunt and get the most valuable food. Two completely different abilities, and they weren't supposed to mix, so women didn't go hunting. But my brother would go hunting, and the Bushmen, there were 4 guys, and they shot with poison arrows. They shot a wildebeest, I think it was. And they tracked it for several days. And they found it lying down, dying. And there were 9 lionesses at least, and a lion, around it, waiting. And there was a lioness who was thinking about killing it. It was still tossing its horns, so she was just thinking about it. The Bushmen arrived and saw this. And they talked to the lions, and they said, we respect you, but this meat is ours, and you've got to let us have it. And the lions, my brother took a film of this. The lions sort of fuss around a little bit and grumble, but they finally gathered together and left. And the men killed the wildebeest and took the meat. And that was never studied by a wildlife biologist because it's gone now. I then went to Etoshapan much later, and there was a lioness there. I was supposed to get a piece of equipment for somebody. And the lioness was sitting by the equipment. So I did what the Bushmen did, and I said, I respect you. I got out of the van I was in, and I said, I respect you, but I need that equipment. And the lioness charged me. She just came at the speed of light, okay? And I jumped back in the vehicle. And they do that to scare you. Because when she did that, she ran right at me, but then when she saw me jump in, she just walked off like that. So she successfully frightened me away. But the Bushmen, that didn't happen with them. The Bushmen, the lions did what the Bushmen asked.
It makes sense because they've
And
been
it was-
living with those animals for thousands
I'm
of years.
sorry?
It makes sense because they've been living with those animals for thousands of years.
Yeah, that's right.
They're
That's
in
right.
harmony with their environment.
But in other places, throughout Africa, the studies were done on man-eating, and it's very common. It takes place after the full moon, so the person who did the most work on this feels that the full moon, after the full moon, there's a dark period before the moon comes up, and it comes up later every night. And those dark periods are where, and when the moon is in the sky, before it's full, as you know, it's always there when the sun sets, so it's light. And the animals your victim can see you. So the lions are hungry during those nights. So after the full moon is when they're most successful. And they're hungry then. They measured the waistlines of lions and found that they were much bigger after the full moon than they were before. And so he thinks that his name is Craig. I'll think of his last name in a minute. he thinks that that gave us these ideas we have about the full moon causing people to be crazy and stuff. And the Bushmen had their trance dances on the night of the full moon. And the Hadza, another hunter-gatherer people up further north, they had their healing dances on the night of complete darkness, the night when the moon comes up, and before the new moon is coming up. So, fascinating stuff.
Sure is.
Well, Liz, thank you so much. I appreciate
Well,
you coming.
thanks for having me. It's
Thank
so
you for
nice to
reading,
be
and
here.
Thanks for answering all the questions.